Hi there, this is Matt Allington, and this is the third and final video in this series where I show you how I built this report that shows me the total cases of COVID in Australia by state. So when I finished up the last video, I indicated that these charts were perhaps not as useful as they could be because, for example, the population of New South Wales is orders of magnitude higher than it is in ACT and certainly in the NT. So what I'd like to do is population standardize these data. So divide the cases by the population to come up with a rate per million. Now to do that, I need to source some population data. And so I went ahead and went to the Australian Bureau of Statistics website. I found this population by state data, and this is the table that I'm going to use. And this has actually got a breakdown by age group and state. In this case, I'm not going to use that data. Generally speaking, I try not to throw away the detail that I source from an official source, but in this case, I want to keep it simple. The other thing is that I don't want to hard code a link to a spreadsheet for this particular report because I want this report to be online and automatically refreshing every day. I don't want to get involved with a gateway or accessing this data online. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to hard code these numbers directly inside Power Query. And so this is the data that I'm going to use. I've seen different population data. This is slightly different to data I use for another report. But let me go ahead and copy these two things, Control C, and I'm just going to go into a blank report and just do some Excel manipulation here. So I'll just paste that to start with, and I'll copy it again and transpose it. Now, if you remember in my earlier reports, there was a lowercase representation of the states here. So I'm just going to quickly replace these so that I can do a join on my report. So that's okay, so there we have it. We've got the population by state. I'll give it a header, and this is the population. Of course, it changes over time, but for this exercise, I think this is close enough. So let me copy that, and because I don't want this gateway, I'm just going to copy that and paste it into my report. So I'll come back here, and this time I'm going to go enter data. You can key the data directly in here. I just find it easier to do it in Excel. Excel is much easier to manipulate the data, and then once you've finished, you just cut and paste it in here. So there's the population data. It automatically detected the headers, and I'll just call this population. Okay, so I'm going to go straight in and edit because I want to go back into Power Query now. And there are various ways that I could load this data table, but because I'm only using a single data point for population, to me, I'm just going to put this as an additional column in my state table. Now, you might recall from one of the earlier videos, when I created my states, I started with a list of states. So I'll come all the way back here. And so if I started with this population table, I probably wouldn't have taken this approach, but you know, we are where we are, and no sense going back and reinventing the wheel. So this population data does not need to be loaded, but what I do need to do is take my state dimension table, and I'm going to merge these two tables together. Now, I forgot that I've changed this into uppercase. In fact, if I come back here, it's lowercase. Here it's uppercase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the source step, and I'm going to merge. So I'm going to merge a query, but I'm going to merge it from the source step because it's lowercase at this point. So I do a merge. I'm going to merge it with the population table. Click on the two columns, left outer join. There's 8 matches. And then I'm going to extract that new column, population. Now I've got the population there. Then I'll convert it to uppercase, and I'll just come in here and rename this column. And there we have it. The dimension table now has the population, and I can use that in my report. Okay, so what I think I'll do, just for developing my measures, I always like to have something simple that I can look at. So I'll just grab a table. Here's my new population column. Here's the state, and I can just bring the population in, and so there are the numbers. And I might just bring, say, new cases. So this is actually the total number of cases that have occurred by state. And so if I want to standardize this, I need to divide the new cases by the population. And so I'll just go ahead and write that measure. So this will be per 1 million population. And so I just simply take the sum of the new cases and I need to divide it by the population. And so the population will be selected value of the state population. So let me have a look at that. And if I put that in, of course, this is not per million. So then I need to multiply that by 1 million. And so now I've got a standardized total cases per million population. So these numbers are now looking much more consistent. Notice we've got an infinity here, and that's because I use selected value. This returns blank at the total row. Okay, so I need to do a couple of things. I'm going to change the formatting. I'll do comma separation with 0 decimal places. And the other thing I really need to do is to handle the infinity case. So maybe instead of selected value, I'll do sum of the population. And so what that will mean is that when we get to the total row, it'll add up the total population for all the states that are selected. And now this should be the average. And just as a quick visualization, I could just go back to this view, change it to a column chart, and you can see that there's some consistency there across the different states. So now I've got my new cases per 1 million of population. And so now I can actually create a new cases per 7-day average that does the standardization by population. So I'm going to come and copy this formula. So this will be a new measure and I'll paste that in here. So new cases, 7-day average per 1 million. And I don't need to change this. This is still correct, but instead of summing the new cases here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my new measure, which is new cases per 1 million, and the rest of that formula should be just fine. Okay, so I'm done with this now. I'll delete this little working page, and let's come back, and I'm going to duplicate this just for a moment. So I duplicate this page. I do this a lot. I'm going to do some mucking around with my chart. I like to duplicate the pages so that I get a clean canvas that I can work on. If I muck it up, I just delete it. So what I want to do is I want to replace the new cases 7-day average with my new cases 7-day average per million population. And now you can see that this is a much more useful chart for comparison purposes. It's much better to have a look at the population per million. But, you know, I want my end users to be able to pick and choose. So what could I do? Well, I could duplicate these charts. I could make another set of these 3 reports and have one with the per million and one without the per million. But there's actually a better way of doing this now. So let me delete this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these new parameters. So I go modeling, new parameter, and I'm going to create a field parameter. There are many use cases for field parameters. I've got a blog article on this. Just search my website for field parameters and you'll find some different use cases. So one of the things I can do with field parameters is I can bring in 2 measures, so the new cases and the new cases per million. I'll give this parameter a name and I will say raw or per million. That'll do. I'll add a slicer to the page. So I've now got a slicer, and this slicer, I might just come up here and format this as a horizontal slicer, and I'll make it nice and wide because I've got a bit of real estate at the top of the page. I'll come here and move my slicer up here. All right, so the next thing I need to do to be able to use this is I need to swap the chart. So at the moment, the chart is using one of those measures, but I'm going to remove that and use this new raw per million as my y-axis. So now when I pick on this one, I get new cases 7-day average. When I click on this one, I get per million. So I can toggle between those two options. So that's quite nice. A little bit of beautification. Let's quickly come up here, turn on the effects, turn on the shadow effect for consistency. The other thing I think I'll do is I'll put this same construct on every page. So I'm going to copy this slicer, Control C, come up here, Control V. When I do this, I'll get prompted, do I want to sync the visual? So I'll say yes. So basically what that means is whichever setting is on one of the slices, that will be inherited on the other pages. So I'll do the same on this page. And I'll sync again. And the other thing it occurs to me, it might be nice if I update my title. So instead of saying total new cases, it'll either say total new cases per million or total new cases in New South Wales. So I need to go back and update my titles. So I'm on the single chart here. So I need to detect which one of these two options is selected. So I just actually need to go and have a look at the table first. In fact, I'll jump over here. You can see the table has got this column. In fact, I've got this sort order, which is going to be very useful. So if it's 1, then it's per million. And if it's 0, it's the raw data. So it's called raw or per million order. So I'll come back over here, go to my title. So I want to change this portion. So there's different ways I could do this, but what I might do, var lead text equals if selected value, because I should only have one of them selected at a time, if selected value and the column was called order. So if that is 1, then we want total new cases in. Otherwise, we want total new cases per 1 million pop in. Right, so they're the two options that I want. Why that's giving me an error. Okay, that should be equals 1. That looks better. And now I replace this with lead text. Let's have a look at that. It looks like I've got these back to front. So when I select the 7-day average, I get per million. When I select the per million, I get this one. So obviously I've put them back to front. So I'll just come back and change it. That equals 0. Okay, so now I can toggle between these two things. I need to update the other chart title. So I'm going to copy this same construct here, Control C, go to my other chart title, add this in as a variable, and change this to lead text. Okay, so that's pretty good. My measures aren't very well laid out here and formatted very well. Now, I think I installed this new tool called Bravo. I literally have never clicked this button. Jason gave me this tip the other day, so I'm going to click on Bravo because my understanding is that there is a button in there that will call DAX Formatter to automatically format all of the measures in my workbook. Literally never done it before, so let's see whether I can work out how to do that. So format DAX, looks pretty straightforward. Select all the measures, format selected, that's pretty easy. Okay, click done, and I'll close that down, and now look at that, nicely laid out and formatted measures. Literally, I have never done that before in my life, so that's a great tip, so thanks Jason for that one. Okay, I think there's one more thing I should do, and that is I should set this slicer so that I can't multi-select. At the moment, I can multi-select, and if I do that, basically I'm going to get unusual results. And so I'll come up here, format this slicer settings, and I'll make sure that it's got single select, and that way I'm not able to select both of those at a time. It's basically one or the other. Okay, so that's it. This is my report. I'm going to go ahead and publish this online and set it to automatically refresh. And so that'll be available for me anytime I want to consume this report.